current semester ending December 17th, 2021. Be a roll call vote. Mrs. Davis.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
She's a yes. Ms. Austin.
Yes.
Mr. Bonds.
Yes.
Mr. O'Banion's a yes. Mr. Van Wert.
Yes.
And the motion passes. 4.3 student expulsion, case 21-2202. Fact-finding hearing conducted by administrative panel. Motion by Board Member Gordon Bonds, seconded by Board Member Bill Van Wert. It is moved that the Board of Education find that there is cause to expel student number 913-007246 from all schools in the district for violation of Educational Code Section 48900CHIK. Specific Education Code Section as they apply include not applicable. It is further moved that the board adopt the terms of the stipulated expulsion order, which is to suspend the expulsion to have the student attend and remain at the alternative education program, George Christian Educational Center. It is hereby ordered that the pupil shall be provided with an educational program at George Christian Educational Center. Alternative program for the current semester and the following semester.
Okay. I'm giving you a thumbs up, but I can't see Jeremy anymore and I can't hear him either. He's gone. Okay.
Please join us if you're so inclined. Please bow your heads. Lord, thank you for bringing us all together here tonight. Please watch over us. Please help us make the best decisions on behalf of our district, our students, and our employees, and above all, the best decisions for you, God. I ask this in your name. Amen. 7.1, public hearing number 2 regarding composition of trustee areas. You're up, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be back here for our second pre-map public hearing. Again, by way of reminder, this is one of the mandatory public hearings that has to occur before we can actually bring maps back to you. And the purpose of the hearing tonight is to get some feedback from you as a board, or members of the public, interested individuals, in what you would like to see in the actual maps when we bring them back to you. For example, do you want the demographer, which is the individual that creates the maps, you want them to try and somewhat follow your school attendance boundaries? Do you want them to follow city boundaries? Are there any particular areas or parts of town or neighborhoods or communities that you think belong together, etc.? That's the type of feedback we're looking for at these pre-map hearings. The next thing that will happen in the process after we get that feedback is we will come back with some actual maps. We'll try to produce 3 of them so that you have something choose from. And at some point, we'll do maybe a community forum or two where we can share those with members of the public. They can come in, provide feedback and comments. And then we enter into the kind of the back half of the process, which is 2 more public hearings, where the difference in those 2 hearings is that we'll actually have maps for you to decide upon. And hopefully, if there's a consensus that can develop around one of those maps, we can get it adopted. And from then, it goes to the County Committee on School District Organization, or said county. And that they have to come and do a public hearing here in your district boundaries. But it's their hearing, it's not your hearing, they have to do their own hearing. And they'll give it either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And that's going to be the conclusion of the process. We are looking to hold that county committee hearing sometime in the new year, maybe January, maybe February. So that's where we're at. So as a part of that public hearing, typically you ask for public comment, and if there isn't any, usually there isn't, the board could discuss it, and then we would close the hearing and move on to the next item. Happy to answer any questions that you might have before we move to comments.
I personally would like to see the map, the boundaries tried to be drawn based around the current board members' addresses or whatever you want to say, and see how it lays out and see what adjustments can be made from there.
Okay. So we will ask staff to provide those residents' addresses so that we can program that into the mix. One thing I will say about that is for school district redistricting and creating maps, we are able to take into account where incumbents reside. That's part of respecting the will of the voters, right? The voters put you into this role. This is not a process that's designed to remove board members by putting them together in the same areas. That being said, that can't be the primary driver. If 2 of you live next door to each other within the same census block, that's going to be impossible to divide. And you kind of cross over into what's called gerrymandering, where we're creating a line that's just for the sole purpose of keeping the incumbent in place. It can be one of several considerations, and we will certainly take that into account, and we'll make sure the model knows to respect incumbency to the extent that the natural boundaries and census blocks live will enable them to do that. So that's good feedback. Appreciate that.
We have to have this done by November of 2022.
Well, actually a little bit sooner under the law. So your next governing board election is November of 2022. So under the law, this process has to be completed 130 days before the election day. So roughly, we like to think of it as the month of June. So we want to be done by June. Used to be, not to add confusion into the mix, but we used to have an additional obligation to get a waiver from the State Board of Education. You might recall us talking about that in the past. Well, that's changed just in the last month and a half. There's a new law that came out that says, you know what, school districts, you've been having to do this for so long. The State Board just puts it on its consent calendar. So rather than make us go through that process to get a waiver, which is meeting and conferring with our bargaining units or school site councils and all of that, coming back here for yet a 5th public hearing on the issue of the waiver, they said, we're going to eliminate that requirement. But the catch is that's eliminated if the county committee adopts your plan or approves your plan starting January of 2022. So we're not going to put this in front of the county committee this calendar year. We'll get through your process, but then we'll make sure the county doesn't take it up into January. If they do, anytime after January, the approval completes the process. We don't have to worry about a waiver anymore. And for those that aren't familiar with the issue, the waiver is normally when you change how you elect your governing board. Under the Ed Code, you have to then put that on a ballot, that question. The voters vote on whether or not you can make that change. But that's potentially problematic in this context, because if your voters turn it down, it leaves you open to liability under the California Voting Rights Act. And if that vote seemed to break down upon racial lines, that would be evidence used against you in that lawsuit. And plus, that's the extra cost and expense of an extra election on that question. So under the education code, school districts can get waivers from certain requirements. And that's one that districts who go through this process commonly request. But it's, again, it's more process, it's more staff time. And that, like I said, recently that requirement was removed by legislation, it was just signed. So we're down to just the 2 pre-map hearings, 2 post-map hearings, and then the county committee is going to do a hearing, but we're not going to ask them to do it until the new year. Because if we do it this year, we're still under that waiver requirement. So we're going to take care of our stuff, and then we'll put it in the hands of the county committee in 2022. And that way we'll have plenty of time. It'll get done before June, before the end of June. So that the next election cycle in November 2022, that will be the first time that your governing board members, I don't know if you have 3 or 4 up in 2022, but those 3 or more individuals, those areas will be up in November for the first time.
A question that we've received at the district office level is, does this process take into account how many voters are registered in that area?
No, it does not, which seems odd, right? There is a requirement to maintain proportionality, but that's measured by total population. Every human being, even if you're not old enough to vote, even if you're not a citizen, even if you're, regardless, every human being is counted. So we take that census count of total population, right? Every single human being in your district, and then we divide that up, in this case, into 7. We're going to divide that up. I don't know what that number is going to be, but let's say it's, pick a number where I can actually do that. Let's say it's 7,000 people. And that means we're looking for areas that are going to be roughly 1,000 people per area. But because of how population works, some of those areas are going to be tiny. If it's, here in this area where there's a bunch of houses, and in those more rural parts, you're going to have to take a lot of territory to capture 1,000 people. So you're going to end up with these different sizes and shapes. But we'll try to make them as compact and connected as possible, so that it's an intuitive exercise. You want to be able to, as a voter, you want it to make sense that you're voting for a certain seat. You want to vote the same seat that your neighbors are voting for. It would be weird if the person across the street is voting for, and the person behind you is voting for yet another trustee. So again, we want to keep communities together as we ironically divide them. We want to at least divide them in a way that we're not significantly splitting neighborhoods that really identify with one another, communities that identify with one another. And that's really one of the reasons that we have now that legal requirement to do those 2 post-map public hearings. So that when you're looking at these maps, you can see if we've done something that doesn't make sense for your community. You can say, why don't you move that line over here? Or, that neighborhood over there really belongs together in area 4. It doesn't make sense to break them off and put them in 3. So that will be the next thing that happens, is we'll produce a series of maps. Maybe have like a community forum. We can have it here or at one of your sites. Usually do that as an open house style, where maybe from 6 to 7, we have people can come in, look at the maps, make comments, have questions, and then we bring them back to you in a public meeting, a regular meeting just like this. Have a public hearing, and we'll have a couple of easels with maps blown up so everybody can see them, and then you'll have something more specific to talk about.
So we've asked for those that cannot make our meeting today, that they could also email questions or comments to our district office. So I'd like to read. We've only received one.
Super.
So as a grandparent of students that attend Dawson Joint School District, I'm very concerned about
A comment or have any questions about it, about the new district? Or districting, not reading, but doing it?
Ron Sullivan, Director of Food Service, I'm the one that wrote that letter. I'm extremely concerned because I am Fresno County. So if you bulk all of Fresno County together, because we are such a rural area, as you say, I don't feel like my vote is gonna be useful at all. So how is that gonna work for Fresno County people?
Do you think that there are enough people in the Fresno County portion of the district that they could have their own district, or do you think that they're so small that?
Our votes don't count for anything.
Well, the way it would work, if you had your own area, then you would be the majority of folks voting for that particular seat. So that means the folks in Fresno County would have their kind of a representative on the board from that territory. So you would be specifically geographically represented because the candidate would have to come from that same area.
Which, like in my letter, there's some great people out there, but there's a lot more that are not so great. So if somebody runs just because they want the insurance, now we have to vote for that person. I don't think that's fair to us to have to vote for somebody that we don't think is the right candidate.
I understand that concern, and there's, regardless of the size of the jurisdiction, there's a lot of candidates that I'm not thrilled in terms of our choices to vote for, but we do the best we can, and if you see that somebody's running that you don't like, then,
And our vote's lost.
well, then I think you get out there and beat the bushes and encourage somebody to step up to the plate and run.
But I don't think, I'm correct if I'm wrong, and that's what the line drawing, you're concerned that you would just take just the Fresno County. And I don't think that's gonna come into play. I think wherever you're at in Fresno County, in my envision would be if we have candidates, say like Mrs. Davis lives in that area, that may be, or if it's 1,000 people, that circle would be 1,000 people, not just Fresno County, correct? I mean, it may have parts of Merced County. It may touch. I mean, it may be like a pot.
But we won't know because we don't know what the population is out there. And we didn't have minimal voters, as you guys all saw in the last election. We didn't have very many people from Fresno County that actually voted.
But remember that the areas are built based around the total population. It's not registered voters.
Right.
So each area will be roughly equal. So wherever you live, there's going to be, let's say there's 1,000, so you and 1,000 others are going to be represented by a
Which would be
seat.
almost probably all of Fresno County.
But it also could be.
No, it could be part of Merced County too. Don't look at it.
They could, but that's what I'm asking. I want
Counting
to
everybody
know.
though too, so.
And that's what you will get. We
Okay.
have
I understand.
the census data at the end of this month. We're going to put together, like I said, we anticipate 3 different versions of maps. And then we're going to have a community forum somewhere. So we encourage you, neighbors, anybody else that's interested, to come out and talk to the demographers who are actually drawing the lines. We're really going to have to rely on you guys because I don't live here, my demographer doesn't live here. And that's really one of the purposes why we have these public areas, so we can hear from the local residents. Because you guys know what communities naturally fit together, right? You know what makes sense for you. It's really a local consideration. So that's why it's important for folks to participate in the process. Because if it's just me drawing it up, I'm just looking at numbers, right? I don't know the communities well.
Mr. O'Banion,
So if nobody runs for that block, then we have to appoint somebody.
That's correct. The same thing that happens now, right? If you have 4 seats that are up, but you only have 3 candidates, those 3 candidates get installed, and then you have to go through an appointment process to take care of it.
From that block.
Yeah,
Within that block.
from. the
Mr.
different systems
O'Banion,
that you're in this system. If you don't have a candidate that runs from the area that's up for election, then when you do the appointment, that appointment has to come from that area.
But now you're appointing somebody that really don't want to be there.
No, I would tell you, I've done jurisdictions with 250 ADA, 250 kids. And even they were able to find a candidate for every one of their areas. What happens is, and I know geographically, you guys are on the smaller side in comparison to other districts, and you're larger than some as well. But what happens is, as a candidate, as you know, having run for the board election before, it's a different thing to run a district-wide election versus just an area, a subset. It's a lot easier. So it really opens up the opportunity for other folks who maybe don't have the time or the resources or the connections to run a district-wide election. They can run out of their, their neighborhood and represent those folks that are their friends and neighbors. So what we have found is that it doesn't really change those circumstances. If you had a hard time finding board candidates before, you'll have a similar challenge under this rubric. But as long as your seats are currently contested, when we make this change, we found that there's always somebody that's willing to run for one of these seats.
Okay.
One of our board
Mrs.
members.
Corelli, I think, had a,
Yeah, to me, I just would like clarification one more time, because you're saying it's not about the population, but it is something about registered voters. I don't live in a community, I'm very far from a community. So when you're looking at this map, is it based on, like, is every section on this map going to be roughly the same size?
Yes.
no.
No.
That's where I'm getting
No.
confused.
No.
So
In population, size of
By
population.
population, not
Yes.
acres or miles wise.
All the population, so there, where I live could possibly look
Be
bigger
huge.
Yes.
because okay,
You could be part of Fresno County with her.
who knows?
I mean, really,
Because if it could.
yeah.
You don't know.
You don't
in
know,
fact,
okay.
I would be shocked
Well, we will know.
if the areas are the same geographic size. They're not
They're
going.
not.
No
No,
way.
there's no way.
So it's
because
based
you
on
have so many
population,
rural
but not registered.
No.
The folks that live in the city limits,
That's what I got.
areas are gonna be smaller geographically than, say, myself.
Yep.
Because I do live on the outlier, Mrs. Davis lives,
But they'll be roughly equal in terms of how many people.
population.
And
But not registered voters, just solid
No.
population, reported population.
there'll be roughly 1,000, in my example, let's say that there's roughly 1,000 human beings in each area.
That ain't
One
no,
of those areas, you could have 200 registered
that ain't
voters,
no prison.
and
close
the other,
by.
you could have 900.
That ain't no prison close by.
We
So
have,
legally, the requirement is to balance based on total population, not registered voters.
We have board member Davis, who's on Zoom, would like
Oh,
to
yes.
make a comment. Go ahead, Mrs. Davis.
So I heard him mention earlier about the public has an option to put in their input. So if our community says, we don't want this at large, like if the majority of the community says we don't want this, even though that's what the community's telling us and we don't do it, we are still subject to litigation. Is that correct? Even if our voters tell us, no, we don't want this.
We've already taken board action.
That's correct, and the board's already voted to go forward in this process. But you're right, even if your voters don't want it, that doesn't get you out of the lawsuit. It's not a defense to the lawsuit under the California Voting Rights Act.
You hear that?
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Are boundaries redrawn based on new population growth?
Census,
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
How often are boundaries redrawn based on population growth?
Okay, so by law, once you are in this by trustee area system, it's every 10 years, following the decennial census, we have to look at how your populations have changed. And if they've changed enough so that they're now, we don't have that balance anymore. Let's say you get a big development out on the west side. And then as a result, that area kind of blows up and there's a huge population difference. Well, then we're going to have to do a lot. It's not a redrawing. It's really a function of making adjustments. And many of the school districts are going through that process here in Merced County because most of them have already been in this system for a while. Some of them are in the system even prior to the 2010 census. So that we like to call that an adjustment. It's not kind of a redrawing. We don't just throw them out of the way and start over. It's, you know what, this area now has 1,500 people and this one's got 500. We don't need to push that line over so that they're 750 each. That makes sense?
Any other
Anybody else?
questions? Can't see behind him, so
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
thank you for your
Thank you
time.
for
We
the input.
appreciate
Very
you.
helpful.
7.2, Resolution 21-2201, sufficiency of instructional materials for fiscal year 2021-2022. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Bond, second by Mr. Van Wert. Mrs. Gurhalter.
Education Code 60119 specifies that the district certify that each pupil in the district will have prior to the end of the year sufficient standards aligned textbooks and instructional materials. All purchases have been made with instructional materials allowances apportioned per Education Code 60242.
Are there any questions for Mr. Gurhalter? Call for the vote. It passes. Oral reports, 8.1, superintendent report. Mrs. Gurhalter.
Okay, so we had a little bit of shifting in our board agenda, if you haven't noticed. And one of the major shifts, we're pushing the superintendent report, the allocation budget report, and board members report to the beginning of the meeting. So today will be the first of that. So first data that I'd like to report on is our enrollment data and future may bigger. First time I ever had to say that. So in district-wise, 2019, you make it a little bit quicker, please, sorry. This is unbelievable. Okay, so looking at a 3-year trend as of this date in 2019-20, enrollment 2346, last year at this time 2292, and right now, although we did anticipate a decrease in enrollment, the anticipation was much greater, so that's good to see. So we're, as of today, at 2258. And then on the slide, a breakdown of the enrollment at each school site. And if you can scroll down, Ajay, specifically looking at our independent studies, something we probably have not anticipated before today, or before these times, our long-term independent study numbers are at 86. So one of the things that you will see today as an action item is an elementary platform, a homeschool platform to support our independent study program called SALIS. Each month until hopefully COVID is no longer with us, I'll report out some COVID district statistics. As of today, total confirmed positive cases for students, we have 35 positive cases, though not currently active, but active from the beginning of the school year, and 8 staff members. We have quarantined a total of 837 students, and vaccinated, we are at 82% according to our statistics. So we've made some district initiatives and are always, there's not a COVID handbook that's been provided to us, so if you ever have any recommendations, input, or ideas, please, we're always up for it. But the district initiatives, currently we've hosted some vaccine clinics with vaccinating 196 community members. It's open to students, staff, and our community. Obviously students all know COVID. We had our first community meeting that addressed COVID questions and processes. Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker, for to support me and our team. We had 52 students, 52 parents attend that first meeting, and we would like to continue providing that service and support to our parents throughout the year. Best practices, communicating them, putting our plans online, and really the consistent message is if you're sick, please stay home. Attendance data. So attendance percentage in 2019-20, as of this time, 92.81% attendance percentage. As of today, our attendance percentage is 96.54. Short of our goal, but completely understandable considering what we're up against. Chronic absenteeism. 12.8%, so 290 students who as of today have missed 10% of the school year or more. And our goal.
Does that take into effect kids on quarantine?
Not kids that have completed their short-term independent study requirements. But yes, if they have not completed their short-term independent study, so they don't get credit. So short-term independent study, they sign a master agreement, they're put on short-term independent study for those 10 days, but they actually don't receive credit, if that's the best term to use, until they complete the work and turn it in, and it's verified. So if there are some students in that count that have not completed it. Our suspension and expulsion data. So really we're looking at how many students have been removed from the classroom in our district. Total suspensions up to date 8, expulsions 2, and then in-house suspensions 13. So that's when a student is not only staying on campus, but going to our in-house facility. Suspension breakdown really specifically, and this is what we'll use. Obviously we'll use expulsions too, but suspension breakdown. What do we need to do to intervene quickly and put practices in place to redirect behavior? Weapons 2, drugs 2, altercations 3, and other 1. That includes our expulsion data. So if you're suspended, you're also double counting. So each month, I'd also like to take the opportunity to report out academic achievement or academic progress. At this time, there's not a whole lot of data except for our beginning of the year data. So I'd like to just share out what we're working towards. So right now we're working towards aligning curriculum to our assessments. Our first assessment is scheduled for October, and that's our local benchmark assessments that our students will participate in math and ELA 3 times a year, 4 times for the elementary and students that don't test. And then the goal is to move into all other subjects, science, social studies, and our teams are building towards that. Our CAS data, we'll be reporting that out next month. And then anticipate the data dashboard. So last year, one of our focuses as our in ed services was creating a dashboard that instead of our data points being all over the place and having to go to different platforms to get student achievement results and data points, we put all that in one spot. And so we did a trial run with our administrators and saw what works, what's not working. And so now the goal is to push this data dashboard out to our teachers to be able to utilize that data to drive instruction. So we're just about there. And then the goal ultimately is a dashboard for parents. So you as a parent can see your child's progress and data points real time as we're seeing. Student activities, I started pulling pictures and there's so many great things happening. One of our goals at our sites is to engage our students, increase the positive culture on our campuses. As you see in the upper left-hand corner, it's our DPHS teachers who are participating in a dress-up day with our students. They don't have to do that, and they're doing it to increase that engagement with our students. In the right-hand corner, we have Mark's elementary students who are presenting an activity that was done on 9/11. In the middle is a Bryant, with his head down, but a Bryant middle school teacher who is participating in a lunchtime activity with students and are getting paper wrapped around him, but on his own time, which I think is great. Bottom left-hand corner is our DPE students who went out and did a salute and listened, moment of silence, and learned a little bit about 9/11. And then bottom right-hand corner, George Christian had their back to school night, which was great. There was lots of student work that was presented that was amazing to see and see the progress the students are already making with their project completion. Next slide that I'll continue to present on each month is our district news. So I'm excited to announce that we are opening our track, phase 1, opening the track. It is Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays from 6:15 to 8 o'clock in the morning. We'd like to get our bearings, see what policies are working, what we need to do to improve services, make sure that we have everything in place before we start small and spread. So the goal is to then open up the track in the afternoons, maybe evenings, but also being respectful of our practices that are occurring and students that are using the track also. We also would like to, if you see on the bottom, our football field, our stadium looks amazing. I'd like to thank all of our maintenance workers, custodial staff, grounds, administration, everyone that made that first game possible. I don't think I've seen that many students at a football game in a very long time, so that just speaks volumes about the culture that we're developing at the field and at our high school. And then, as you can see on the right-hand corner, was our football players after a win, which big smiles. Fall programs were released. Board members, you have the fall program in front of you, and if anyone would like to see the fall program, please stop by my office or Mrs. Smith's office. I'd like to thank Mrs. Landis and Mrs. Hernandez over here who put the programs together, and they did an awesome job. So stop by and see those, or buy one at the next football game. And then Williams visit, we completed all of our Williams visits. So next board meeting, anticipate our reports, and we'll go from there. Upcoming events, we have next Friday. So this Friday's clinic was moved to next Friday, and we'll continue to have clinics in the future. October 7th is our virtual excellence in education. So Mr. Page, Mrs. Hernandez will be recognized at that event. And October 8th is the end of the first quarter. And our students on October 11th through 22nd will participate in the fall benchmark, which we're excited to see the progress our students are making, or change instruction accordingly or not. Questions? Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mrs. Verhoeven. 8.2 fiscal cash status update presented by Ms. Melissa Kelpinski, Assistant Superintendent, Business Services.
Good evening, and thank you for having me present a short fiscal cash update. It's a little bit longer than my typical report, but I did need to cover just a few brief things. So looking at the first slide, I wanted to show you the adopted budget, which was presented in June. So it's pretty small on the screen, but it's divided into 3 columns. So the first column is the unrestricted resources. The middle column is are the restricted resources, and then the column on the right is the total combined. The top of the chart shows the revenues. Those are the monies coming in. And in addition to that is the contributions, because there are a couple of programs in our district that don't have an income source of their own, like our special education and our routine restricted maintenance. So the general fund makes a contribution to those restricted programs. So it comes out of the unrestricted side and goes straight into the restricted side to operate those programs. At the bottom of the chart is the expenditures, the budget for the expenditures, also identified in the 3 different columns: restricted, unrestricted, restricted, and the total. So that's a snapshot of where the adopted budget started in June. If we take that adopted budget and look at the next slide, we're going to put that into what we analyze as our fund balance. So as we've discussed many times, we have a beginning fund balance, which is what the prior year ending fund balance ended the year at. So we now know that for 21-22, our beginning fund balance in all those columns and the total. For this slide, it now then shows the projected revenues for our fiscal year 21-22 and our projected expenditures. The difference of that is either a net increase or a net decrease in our fund balance. So you can see that in each line, there's second to last column, second to last row, is a net decrease in our fund balance for each of the categories. But our ending fund balance is shown on the bottom line. So that's where we started in June. A change, as I shared with you last time, there was a change after the budget was adopted by the state to include an additional resource. The next slide, please. Okay. To include a change to our revenues. So as you may recall, last time I said that the LCFF revenue had an increase of 15% to the concentration grant. So in this slide, I wanted to highlight that the second to last row shows that additional 15% in the concentration grant, and it's up for this year, just over $1 million. That is in our LCFF funding, unrestricted funds, but actually has a caveat that it's to be spent in a restricted way on certificated staff and classified staff that provides extra services for students. So even though that our funding will increase by $1 million, ongoing funding, it still has to be spent in a very specific way. I'm sure that was highlighted there and the impact to the budget at this time. Those changes will be incorporated at first interim, those budget changes. One other thing to highlight on this page is that, as you can see, the net change from prior year on the bottom line, as 1920, there was a positive change. 2021, we saw a negative increase to our LCFF, our ongoing funding. That's because we had a drop in ADA. So there was a drop in ADA. There was no COLA that year. So we actually had to just realize the reduction in ongoing income in that category. Now in fiscal year 21-22, there's a significant increase in our ongoing funding, and that includes that $1 million extra 15%. But if we would have, Mrs. Grahava had mentioned that our enrollment is not, we don't have a big jump up. It's still the same as what we've been looking at. So when we move into 22-23, we'll take another hit on that ongoing funding. And that's why you see the negative 133,000. Why is it not 664,000 like the prior year that we had this happen? Well, it's because in 22-23 they are into the payment of COLA, and so the COLA has offset our reduction in ADA. So if we move on to the next slide, that just over $1 million increase in concentration grant funding comes from this chart, and I tried to make it bigger on that little call out there. This is our LCFF calculator, and this is what determines the amount of monies in our supplemental and concentration grant funds is needed to be expended to increase or improve our services for our students. So you can see how it just kind of catapulted from 6.8 million in 2021 to now 8.5 million. In our budgeted, in the adopted budget, we had already budgeted 7.4 million for the increased and improved services. So we just have to identify that additional million for those restricted resources. So the only thing I have to cover next is the cash flow. And it's a different format. Be a little bit easier to follow along. This only includes actuals through the first 2 months because we've only gone down the past couple months. The rest of it is a projection, and it appears that we will be fine this year. There are no cash deferrals. So at this time, things are looking good. And this will be a report that we continue to monitor closely as we move along. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kopinski.
8.3 report from board members. It's Austin. Schmelworth.
Yeah, it's just exciting to see that we get to finally use the new football facility, and tomorrow night we play Chowchilla. And Dr. Miller, believe it or not, had a whole lot to do with getting this project going on. And so he'll be there, and hopefully that we can take it to him pretty good. But he had a lot to do with getting this thing started and going, and I really appreciate that.
I have nothing. Thank you, Mr. Van Wert.
I have Mrs. Davis would like me to read something.
Mrs. Davis, sorry.
I'm going to read something for her.
Got it.
Thank you all for your continued hard work, dedication, and determination in providing our kids an education and as normal of an experience as possible. I appreciate each and every one of you, and be well.
Thank you. Information discussion items 9.1, first reading, June 2021 policy updates. Mrs. Grijalva.
So these are the June 2021 policy updates. There's about 15 new updates, and they are attached. If anybody has any questions, would you like me to read them?
Mr. Fanworth, would you like her to do these?
Excuse me.
If anybody reads them later and has questions, please feel free to come
The
by
board
my
policies.
office.
Do you want her to read all the board
Yeah,
policies?
yeah. sure. We got
Okay,
nothing-
let's do it.
They got nothing to do.
I've read them multiple times. so
Dodger's
Let's do
already
it
done
again.
today, so.
9.2, first reading, policy 6146.4, differential graduation and competency standards for students with disabilities.
So this is a first reading for differential graduation, and the idea is that some of our students in special education would, or there's criteria that our special education students would need to meet in order to receive a diploma. And there may be some students, if they don't meet that criteria, would receive a certificate. The students that, there are pros and cons to both. The con about going the certificate route would be that students would not have a diploma. Therefore, when they are going for a job and that requires a diploma, then they would not have that to be able to apply. The pro would be that students that normally might not even be able to go the diploma route now has an opportunity to earn a certificate.
Any questions?
And if after reading you have additional questions, Mrs. Delmas or myself are more than happy to answer those.
Thank you. 9.3, education protection account funding, presented by Melissa Kalpinski, Assistant Superintendent of Business Services. Mrs. Kalpinski.
So this report shows the amount of EPA funding that we received in our fiscal year 2021. And that it was used on instructional salaries, and that's in compliance with the law. We pass a resolution when we adopt a budget that says we're going to get this much money, we're going to spend it a certain way. And this is just showing the monies that we did spend in fiscal year 2020.
Questions? Thank you. 10.1, public concerns will be heard by the board at this time. However, they will not be discussed. Policy 9323 limits individuals' presentation to 3 minutes. The president may extend the time under certain circumstances. This is the opportunity for members of the public to focus on issues important to the district's purpose of education. Under board policy, this time may not be used to present derogatory information of the personal nature of any employee. Members of the public who wish to address the board must speak from the podium and identify themselves. See none? Adoption of routine consent items. Consent calendar represents routine items acted upon in one motion by roll call vote. The recommendation is for adoption unless otherwise specified. Any item can be removed for discussion upon request. Contracts, agreements, proposals, 11.2 MOU agreement. The seal of biliteracy proficiency project school year 2021-2022. 11.3 Associated Student Body Club establishment. FFA Club, Dos Palos High School. 11.4 2021-2022 Migrant Education Partnership Agreement. 11.5 2021 through 2023 agreement between Merced County Superintendent of Schools and all Merced County schools in support of Here to Learn program. 11.6 Merced County Office of Education Internship Agreement. 11.7 Technology Equipment Disposal and 2021 Summer E-Waste Inventory. Donations, monetary donations in memory of Leon Sorg for Marks Elementary School Veterans Day Program. 11.9 Donation of artificial grass to the exterior fence of the DPHS football field. Minutes, 11.10 board meeting minutes of 8/19/21 regular school board meeting. Out of state overnight travel, 11.11 2021-22 FFA calendar of events and overnight trips. Warrants and payroll, 11.12 warrants and payroll. Is there a motion? Moved. By Mr. Barnes. Second. By Ms. Austin. Are there any questions about anything in the consent? Call for the vote. And it passes. Action items 12.1, resolution 21-2202, representative of governing board, Merced County Schools Insurance Group. Is there a motion? By Mr. Bonds. By Ms. Austin. Mr. Hall?
It's a resolution for Merced County Schools Insurance Group.
Are there any questions? Call for the vote. And passes. 12.2, 2020-21 unaudited actual revenues and expenditures. Is there a motion? By Mr. Van Wert. By Mr. Bonds.
I realized I didn't bring my paper with the notes, so you're gonna get the really shortened version, but I hope that's okay. Have it all in here. Okay, so here's the unaudited actuals for our fiscal year 2021. So what does closing the books actually entail? Well, it entails setting up the accounts payable, anything that we still owe, something that we bought in that year. We still need, that we'll still pay, but maybe we'll pay it in July. We accrue all accounts receivables, any monies that we're expecting in that account for, that should be accounted for in fiscal year 2021. We balance all petty cash and inventory, and we set our liability and asset and liability accounts. Then some of our revenues, we have to defer grants that we didn't spend the entire amount this year to the next year. And then obviously we'll review all transactions to make sure everything's in order, and it takes a lot of time, and my team works diligently to help me, and I'm very appreciative for that. So the estimated actuals we'll talk about versus the unaudited actuals, and the estimated actuals were in the budget adoption report, and that really was just the estimate of where we thought we would end the year, which is incorporated into that. It's our best, it's a best guess really. From, as I talked about already in the fiscal cash update, there's been some significant changes, and those changes will be incorporated at first interim. The one I did not mention in my previous report was that ESSER 3 federal funds have been awarded, and were awarded late in the year. They weren't able to be, even though we couldn't expend the money this past year, we weren't supposed to recognize that revenue until fiscal year 21-22. So that's a $5.9 million amount for additional needs due to the pandemic, and 20% set aside for learning loss mitigation. And a plan that we're going to write and bring forward with community input on how those funds should be spent. So something also to look at this time is our enrollment versus our P2 ADA and our funded ADA. We kind of talked about that a little bit. We are in declining enrollment, which just means we need to be diligent about looking at our expenses. And at the for our unaudited actuals in fiscal year 2021, there was a 0% COLA, like we had talked about, and these were the other factors that are taken into consideration when at this time we look at our multi-year projections with how the books close. Again, the chart that I shared in the fiscal cash update, just to highlight that blue line shows the amount of ADA that we've been funded on. We've been in a prior year pattern, which means we're having the declining enrollment. We were in a hold harmless because of the pandemic. So we hold harmless to that 2257 of 1920, but in 22-23 we'll be funded on the greater of 22-23, depending on what that enrollment comes in as, or our 21-22, which is still unknown at this time. On Wednesday, the first Wednesday in October, is what's called Census Day, and that's the day that CBE has determined to lock in our actual enrollment. So a report will be done, and that will give us that number we always talk about, 2346, 2292. At this point, we're estimating 2122 is 2292. Megan had shared, Mrs. Bahama had shared is 2258. I'm hoping it's more than that. So we'll see, but that's just about a week away.
We're going to go out and recruit.
Right. So here's just a comparison from the differences in revenue that we received, what we estimated at estimated actuals time, to the unaudited actuals, what we actually received. And in the colored boxes below the chart, it kind of just gives a little a reason for the difference, why it came in different. So our federal revenues were anticipated to be a lot more. When we didn't spend all our federal revenues, we defer that amount to the next year. And so we have to record on the books what we actually spent. So it went from the 9 million to the 6 million in federal revenues, a decrease of that 2.7 million. So in the green box, though, let me call your attention to the fair market value of cash in the county treasury. So new this year is incorporating into this reporting the fair market value of cash. That's if we were to liquidate everything, that all the district's assets, the cash would have a certain that's a new thing, and you'll see that in the state reporting. So if we look at the differences in expenditures, this was a very different year, as you know, and we had a lot of one-time dollars that came into play this year. Specifically, there was the 2.5 million that was awarded in 1920, that we expended some in 1920 in the pandemic, but the rest of it was expiring on December 30th of 2020 last year. So we did that. We used those funds for their intended purposes in response to the pandemic. And so spending 2.5 on COVID-related expenses offset some of our general fund expenses. It's just about everything we did last year was COVID related. So a lot of our general fund budget wound up being offset. So you can see there's if you unrestricted to unrestricted in those columns, you can see that there's that difference in the budget. And now we're talking actuals. These were our estimated numbers and our actual. This just shows you a breakdown, and the percentages are a percentage of all expenses expended. So the expenditures and the percent of all expenditures. On the next slide, we'll look again at our ending balance and our reserve and our multi-year projections. So you saw already the adopted budget. Ending fund balance is now in that second column, but then we'll take that out to your fiscal year 22-23 and 23-24. And you can see that we are at a significant amount of monies in 22-23, but that is just spending all those one-time dollars. And then when all the monies that we have that are sitting in our fund balance restricted have been spent due to their deadlines, back in line with a budget that is sustainable. It also shows that we are maintaining our 16% reserve and that there are one-time commitments, one-time assignments for other things that we know we do still have to spend some one-time money on. We have textbook adoptions to accomplish, and we have safety things and replacement programs in place. So those are still there. For the other funds, there's not just the general fund. This chart shows you their beginning balance, the revenues that they received, expenses that went out, if there were any transfers or loans, and the ending balance and the cash balance. So it was a very interesting year. And I look forward to what 2021, 22 brings. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
You might as well say it.
All right, I have one more.
So we've got a motion on the floor. Call for the vote. That passes. 12.3 resolution 21-2203 GAN limit. Is there a motion? By Mr. Bonds. By Ms. Austin.
So the GAM limit is a normal item, happens every year, and it's calculated fortunately by the state accounting software. And it just provides the GAM limit that we have for 21 and the GAM limit for 21, 22.
Any questions? Call for the vote. It passes. 12.4, resolution 21-2204 for temporary interfund cash transfer. Is there a motion? By Mr. Bonds. By Ms. Austin.
This is a resolution to be able to transfer funds from one account to another in our bank accounts to be able to support different programs.
Questions? It passes. 12.5 contracts for services, classic charter bus. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Bonds. Second by Mr. O'Banion. Mr. Grohl.
This is a contract for a classic charter bus due to our shortage in transportation. We've needed support specifically for our athletic events. So this is a contract. We will only use them when our transportation is not available.
Do we get
And
to
when
use
they're
COVID
available.
money for that, for those charter buses? Can we use COVID money for the charter buses?
I believe.
Yes, if the reason that our transportation is not
Because of COVID.
available because of absences or.
Well, that's why we're using them, so.
Right, physical distancing, we don't have enough buses to provide the correct distancing, yes.
The other thing I'd like to point out is this is we are ratifying, so we've already used this for 1 or 2 trips. So we're ratifying, so we're going back.
Any questions? Call for the vote. It passes. 12.6, a SILIS cyber school. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Bond. By Ms. Austin.
So this is a program that's going to support our elementary long-term independent study program.
Are there any questions? Call for the vote. And it passes. 12.7 revised 2021-2022 Bryant Middle School Parent-Student Handbook. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Bonds.
Second.
By Mr. Van Wert. Mr. Hall.
Due to the new administration at Bryant, there's some revisions similar to what we took place for the high school last month that they would like to propose, and they're highlighted in red.
Any questions? Call for the vote. It passes. 12.8 Dos Paso Orlando Joint Unified School District Revised Section 504 Americans with Disabilities Act Handbook. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Bonds. Second by Mr. O'Banion. Mr. Hall.
Our Students with Disability 504 Act handbook, we went through an audit last school year. And so the findings and changes that need to be made, they're very minor, more so towards name changes and including services, but you can find them in this handbook to be compliant.
Any questions? Over the vote. And it passes. 12.9, Resolution 21-2205, authorizing the lease purchase of vehicles and related services and master equity lease contract. Enterprise Fleet Management Incorporated. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Bonds. Seconded by Ms. Austin.
Presented by Matthew McCulloch.
Very simple. We talked about this once before at board meeting. This is the contract and the quote.
So Fleet
Man, a
Man,
few words.
Easy.
Are any of these gonna be electric?
No, sir.
Maybe they should be.
In the future, we're talking about EV chargers, but once we do another solar array, but that's when we start looking at that.
Did we ever get,
We do.
did we ever get electric carts to use on that? Because those gators are,
Correct.
gas
It actually
driven?
plugs into a 110 plug. Electric car does.
that wouldn't be with Fleet Management.
Any other questions? And it passes. 12.10, Associated Student Body Club Establishment, Bobcat Hiking Club, Bryant Middle School. Is there a motion?
so moved.
By Mr. Van Wert. Second by Mr. O'Banion. All,
So Mr. Mazzone would like to start a new club. So it's a new club at Bryant Middle School. It's Bobcat Hiking Club for the 21-22 school year. It's been vetted. There is a constitution attached, and I'd like to move forward.
any questions? Call for the vote. Passes. Personnel, 13.1, coaches and volunteer coaches. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Bonds. Seconded by Ms. Austin. Any questions? Comments,
So
concerns?
can I just speak on this?
You bet.
So a little change in personnel says we're changing agenda items. We're also changing the structure of our personnel section. So rather than listing all of our each individual hire as an action item itself, we'll be grouping them between coaches, certificate staff, classified stipends. We'll continue to do individual action items for administrators. And as we will be able to pull them up,
Can he put that list up or not?
he's doing it right now.
It doesn't do me a lot of good. Very good. Names. Mine.
Are there any questions or anybody would like needs to pull any one of these out for individual consideration? Are we good with moving on with as motion and seconded?
Have they passed background check?
So if you scroll over, so name, position, title, school site, the stipend columns, that's the column of the stipend, the amount, their effective date, and pre-employment clearance. So as long as that's checked, that's letting us know that pre-employment clearance has taken place and cleared.
Good, Mr. Fowler?
And it's an attachment to your board item.
Call for the vote. And it passes. 13.2, certificated staff. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Bonds, seconded by Mr. O'Banion. Mr. Hall.
Our certificated staff list is coming up. This would be our teachers or new teachers for that matter.
I want to pull off Monica Van Wert for an individual vote.
Go with that?
Let's see a second.
First two.
Second.
We need a second.
Second.
Mr. Elworth is making a motion to pull off.
Mr. Van Werth has made a motion to remove or to separate Monica Van Werth's appointment into a separate
Action item.
action item.
Do a roll call.
Roll call.
Ms. Austin? Van Werth? Oh, yes. Yes, Mrs. Davis?
I'm gonna,
Give me a thumbs up. She's a
Thumbs
yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Jeremy? I'm a yes.
on Van Wert. Put this vote on Van Wert separate.
So now we'll vote on Mrs. Van Werth separately.
I can't hear
That's
you.
what's up. Mrs. Van Werth.
Was first.
is
Okay, now
first.
now we need to vote on the rest of the list. So we're good with Mrs. Van Werth. We pulled her aside, so now we
Okay,
need to
so
go
what
for the
are we
rest.
voting on right now?
The rest of the
The
list.
rest of them.
Yes.
Okay. Call for the vote. You want to do a roll call?
Yes.
Ms. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Van Werth?
Yes.
Mr. Vans, yes. Mrs. Davis?
Thumbs up. Yeah, yeah.
Thumbs up?
Yes.
Yep, she's good. So now we have
So we're on 13.3,
13.3, so now we're voting for,
classified staff.
no, we have to approve Mrs. Van Werth.
You already did that. That was your first, so we did Mrs. Van Werth, and then we did the rest of the certificated staff, and now we should be on 13.3 classified staff.
We have another vote.
I think we're backwards.
We're on 13.3. I need a motion.
Bill voted for it.
Yes.
No, I
He didn't
didn't.
want to. Yes, he did.
No, you
We
said
haven't
one like
voted for
this.
it yet. We haven't even.
Okay, 13.3 classified staff. Is there a motion?
Oh,
So to
By
be
Ms.
clear,
Austin.
Mr. Van Werth abstained from Monica Van Werth's, and then
Yes.
he voted yes for certificated staff for the list.
It just stayed in all right.
okay, yeah, let's move on.
Do we have a motion for 13.3
So moved.
by Ms. Austin, second by Mr. Bonds? Is there any questions? Call for the vote. Man.
Do I get the vote now or? You got me confused, Jeremy.
It's all good. First time, we got this.
And it passes. 13.4 stipends. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Bonds. By Ms. Austin. Mr. Hall.
Stipend positions that we'd like to approve, so educational stipends, more specifically.
Any questions about these lists? Call for the vote. That passes. 13.5, special education substitute paraprofessional. Is there a motion
So moved.
by Mr. Bonds,
Second.
by Mr. Van Werth, Mr. Hall?
The special education substitute for a paraprofessional position.
Call for the vote. And it passes. 13.6, extra pay for extra duty, home and hospital, Dos Palace Elementary. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Bonds. By Ms. Austin. Mr. Hall.
We have a Dos Palace Elementary student who is required in a home and hospital situation that we'd like to approve for the teacher to service at home. Extra pay, extra duty.
Any questions? Call for the vote. Passes. 13.7, extra pay for extra duty paraprofessionals for bus supervision, Dos Palace Elementary and Marks Elementary. Is there a motion?
So moved.
By Mr. Rainworth, second by Mr. Bonds. Mr. Oliver.
So due to transportation shortages, we have, this is to ratify, so to pay past for extra pay and extra duty and to move forward. So when our buses are late or when they're extended time, so our teachers can go plan, then we're paying extra pay for extra duty for our paraprofessionals to supervise. We're hoping to have that solved here in the next week-ish, week and a half. But for right now, that's the extra pay for extra duty.
Thank you. Any questions? Passes. 13.8, event staff job description. Is there a motion? Mr. Bonds, second by Mr. Van Wert. Mr. Earl.
It's a job description for an event staff. So this would support our extracurricular activities when needed on a need basis. And we would post a position on EdJoin and have a pool of people that could support those events. For example, right now, football ticket takers.
Any questions? And it passes. Written reports, 14.1, health services, Priscilla Whitaker. 14.2, maintenance, operations, and transportation, Matthew McCullough. 14.3, preschool, Virginia Franco. 14.4, special education, Laura Delmas. 14.5, human resources, Jason Van Allen. 14.6, food services, Rhonda Sullivan. 14.7, technology, Bajay Lee. Are there any questions about these written reports?
Hey, Matt, is solar up and running yet? It's running.
Any other questions? Future agenda items requested, 15.1, request from board members for future agenda items. Ms. Austin, do you have any future agenda items? Mr. Van Wert?
Nope.
I have none. Mr. Bonds?
I don't know if this is appropriate or not for a school board meeting. Like council meetings, we adjourn in memory of people who've lost in the community.
Sure we do.
I don't know if we can do that here.
Sure.
Maybe look into it.
We've done in the past.
That's all I have.
About Mrs. Davis, does Mrs. Davis have a report? No. 16.1, adjourned meetings or motion. By Mr. Bond, second by Ms. Austin, call for the vote. And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.